All right, everybody. So, I've been reflecting a lot lately on instruction. We talk so much about innovative learning, ownership, blended, personalized, which is great. And I'm a huge proponent of that. But when we speak about the holistic experience and really meeting the needs of the whole child and education, a lot of it comes down to instruction. And it really is the quality of the instruction that ultimately will determine the type of learning that takes place, where our kids really are owning it, whether through blended or personalized pathways. So I've been doing a lot of coaching and spending a lot of time in classrooms. Last month, I probably did about 100 different walkthroughs. And you see a lot of examples of direct instruction. And when you look at John Hattie's work on effect size, direct instruction is one of the higher effect strategies through his huge meta-analysis. And it's a 0.6. But then I was thinking about, how I was trained to be a teacher. And I'm not saying that training was perfect, but some of the things that I learned still have value today. And it really made me think back to a woman whose work came out in late 70s, early 80s by the name of Madeline Hunter. And Madeline Hunter had the ITIP model, the instructional theory into practice. And I was thinking about that as I was giving feedback to teachers, and I'm like, what of those elements still have value today? And what can we do to actually improve instruction to in turn enhance the learning experience for kids? So, this week, as I reflected, I kind of developed a blog post based on the feedback that I've been giving teachers and leaders. How can we take advantage of that 10 to 15 minutes where direct instruction might be appropriate and really support and improve that? So let's think about this. 10 to 15 minutes. We do ultimately have to deliver content so kids can access and create new knowledge. So as we look at some of these elements, and when we think about ITIP and we think about this list I'm going to go through, please know you're not going to include every single one of those in a lesson. They're just suggestions to think about as you're planning or providing feedback on instruction. The first is a standards-aligned learning target. We talk about objectives versus learning targets. Objective really is what the adult wants. It's based on scope and sequence, aligned to standard. Doesn't really resonate with kids. Learning targets really articulate why this idea is important, how the learner will use it, how well they've actually accomplished the task, and what they'll be able to do after the lesson. Learning targets are in learner-friendly language. I can, I will. Do you have to explicitly put them on a board for kids to see? No, not necessarily. But kids should understand and have an expectation of why they're learning what they're learning, how they're going to use it, and what criteria determine whether or not they're successful. All you really do for a learning target, unpack the standards. Anticipatory set. The beginning of the lesson is so important. How do we elicit prior knowledge? How do we get kids excited? What is that bridge between old content and new content? How do we pique their interest? So when we think about that, an anticipatory set, 5 minutes could be a really well-designed do-now activity that brings in that relevant, authentic context, makes that connection, and really gets kids set for what's going to be learned today. Next is review prior learning. Research has shown that the review of prior learning, how kids transfer what they've learned to support new learning, is critical in the learning process. The do now activity could be an effective strategy to review prior learning. Next is modeling. When we think about research here as well, research in cognitive science has shown that eliciting prior understandings is a necessary component of the learning process. I'm sorry, that was review prior learning. Modeling. This is where teachers demonstrate how the tasks are going to be completed or how they're going to be done. So when we think about getting our kids ready for actively applying what they've learned, that modeling component is so important. What I feel, especially in the age of technology innovation, one of the most important elements of instruction is how we check for understanding. Technology definitely gives us an upper hand in this, but checking for understanding, self-checks throughout the lesson, determining whether kids are getting it. And that information can not be just a cue to move on, but it could be a cue to reteach or reinforce a concept that kids are having difficulty with. We need to know if kids are getting it. If not, we just keep going, more and more kids fall behind. Then there's practice. Whether it's guided practice or independent practice, both are important pathways to get kids to actively apply what they've learned. good instruction sets the stage up for what should be authentic practice, where kids are applying not just knowledge, constructing new knowledge, and really coming full circle, understanding what they're learning, how it's important, and why they're learning it. When we think about practice, I think the next iteration of the ITIP model is authentic application of learning. Direct instruction, chalk and talk, giving kids information, not saying it's not important, but there has to be some authenticity in how kids are applying that. They have to see the value. They have to see the purpose. And when we talk about authentic application, that's where relevancy comes into play. Think about closure, another staple of Madeline's ITIP model. When we think about our objective or learning target, which sets the expectations aligned to the standard of what kids are expected to know and do. The only way we can get a sense of whether or not they've accomplished that is a well-defined closure activity at the end. It could be an exit ticket using technology. It could be coming back to essential questions. But the key with a closure is asking the questions or having an activity that involves all students to get a pulse as to where they are. Another effective element of good instruction is feedback. Feedback can come through checking for understanding. Yesterday, as I was doing some coaching visits, kids were doing group work, and a teacher had on a piece of paper and clipboard all of her student names and boxes. So as she was going and giving them feedback, she was writing it down so she could remember where kids were at, and she was sharing this feedback with them. Kids have to know, how they are progressing, meeting, or exceeding the expectation that's set. And finally, when we talk about good instruction, when it's all said and done, how do we know kids learned? How do we know what they learned? The degree to which they've mastered the concepts? And that really comes down to assessment. And when we think about all the talk of innovation, new, better ideas, using technology, it all doesn't matter if we don't innovate the way we assess. If technology changes, the world's changing, new platforms, new programs are changing, is assessment changing? Are we improving the way that we are not only determining whether learning took place, but giving kids a good idea of what they were able to accomplish? So again, none of these strategies have to be implemented all the time. Really, it's up for you to see where you are as an educator and as an administrator and where you can grow and improve. So you can check out the detailed list on my blog. And until next week, have a great day, everybody.